So 250 years ago, right now, the revolution was well underway. The American Revolution had been started. The Continental Congress was meeting in this building, Independence Hall. And one thing I've been doing every day is just checking letters that the Founding Fathers wrote back and forth to each other. So I figured I'd check today and see if I find anything interesting and share it with you. I've got my laptop right here. So I'm gonna be looking down and checking for letters. Okay, today is, let's get the camera set up here properly. Okay, you can see Independence Hall in the background there. Today is July 24th, so let's read some letters from 250 years ago on July 24th. Let's see what the Founding Fathers were writing. There are 7 documents today. You see one to George Washington from John Hancock, to John Adams from Samuel Chase. Interesting. From John Adams to James Warren, Richard Cranch to John Adams to Abigail Adams to Mercy Otis Warren. So a lot of Adams family today. So let's start with general orders. General orders, 24th of July, 1775. Okay, let me take a sip of the coffee real quick. Okay, countersign Cumberland. Parole, Salisbury. It being thought proper to distinguish the majors from the brigadiers general by some particular mark, for the future the majors general will wear a broad purple riband, notwithstanding the general orders marking the distinctions of general officers, aide-de-camp, etc. The generals are frequently stopped by the sentinels, which can only happen from the captains having neglected to read the orders to their respective companies. If any general officer, aide-de-camp, or major of brigade is again stopped through the ignorance of the sentinels, the captains will be responsible. As any attempt the enemy from their late disappointments may have the rashness or the hardiness to make, will be violent and sudden, the general expects the officers and soldiers will be not only resolute but alert to defeat, and in a particular manner he enforces his orders to every field officer upon no account, duty excepted, to lay out of camp, but upon every occasion to show by their examples that activity and ready and steady courage so necessary to defeat an enterprising enemy. Notwithstanding the orders of the 11th instant, expressly forbidding all officers and soldiers from quitting their guard before they are regularly relieved and dismissed, the general is informed such unsoldier-like practices are still committed. He therefore admonishes all officers and non-commissioned officers not to suffer any person to quit their guard upon any pretense, care to be taken. The men are properly supplied with provisions before they mount guard. Report being this morning made to the general that the main guard room is kept abominably filthy and dirty. For the future, one commanding officer is not to relieve another upon that guard until he is assured that the officers' and men's apartments are clean and in decent order. The surgeon of every regiment in the lines, redoubts, or in or near Cambridge, to deliver tomorrow at 12 at noon to the adjutant general at headquarters an exact return of the sick in the regiments they respectively belong to, the names, rank, and disorders of each officer, non-commissioned officer, and soldier to be mentioned in the return. The returns of the surgeons of the corps stationed in and near Roxbury to be made to the commanding general at Roxbury, Tuesday noon, in the manner and form directed by the above order, and the general commanding at Roxbury will transmit them to headquarters at orderly time, Wednesday. Okay. For the insignia to be worn by Brigadier Generals, see General Orders 14th of July, 1775. This has come up several times in these general orders. You can go back to 14th of July and see that directive. But it has come up a couple times. I do get the sense that identifying officers was a problem for the Sentinels in the Continental Army early on, because they really couldn't tell who was an officer and who was not, so this seems to be an ongoing problem. Footnote number 2, for George Washington's order forbidding officers and soldiers who were posted in the lines from sleeping outside their encampments, see General Orders 7th of July. See also General Orders 18th of July regarding the need for alertness in the lines. You can go back to the dates, videos from both of those dates that I've already read and see those general orders. Major General Artemus Ward took command at Roxbury under General Orders 22nd of July, 1775. Yeah, I read that 2 days ago, 2 videos ago. You can go back and see that, the way George Washington divided the army into 3 divisions and then sent General Ward to the south of Boston at Roxbury. Next, let's read To George Washington from John Hancock. Okay, this one's a little bit on the longer side, so this may be, so let's get started. To George Washington from John Hancock, 24th of July, 1775, Philadelphia. Sir, your letter of the 10th instant, with the enclosed papers being duly received, was laid before Congress and immediately taken into consideration. In answer to the several matters therein contained, I am to inform you that the Congress appointed a committee to inquire what quantity of light sailcloth sheeting osnabrigs could be obtained in this town for the purpose of making tents, and in this business the committee are now closely employed. It is agreed that tow cloth will be most proper for hunting shirts, and of this the Congress are informed a sufficient quantity may be obtained in Rhode Island and Connecticut. It is expected you will give orders for purchasing there the quantity necessary. Agreeable to your recommendation, they have appointed Joseph Trumbull, Esquire, Commissary General of Stores and Provisions for the Army of the United Colonies. Again, Trumbull was from Connecticut. He was the governor of Connecticut, I believe. Does that make sense? Well, he was from Connecticut, and governor of Connecticut. He was one of the only, if I'm correct in saying here's the governor of Connecticut, he was one of the few, if not the only, colonial governor to side with the Patriots, and he was instrumental in supplying the army. So George Washington, in a previous letter, requested the Congress to make him commissary general, so that there would be a clear way to request supplies for the army, because at this point there were just too many people who George Washington had to ask for supplies. So he just wanted one person to then handle it, and Trumbull was very good at that. So George Washington asked that Trumbull be made the commissary general, and this is clearly John Hancock accepting and making that official. So here you go. It is okay, and that's why they're talking about Rhode Island and Connecticut also. Okay, let me read that again. Agreeable to your recommendation, they have appointed Joseph Trumbull, Esquire, Commissary General of Stores and Provisions for the Army of the United Colonies. The appointment of a Quartermaster General, Commissary of Musters, and a Commissary of Artillery is left to you, the Congress not being sufficiently acquainted with persons properly qualified for these offices. They have ordered a company of matroses to be raised in this city and sent forward. Okay. General Thomas, they have appointed 1st Brigadier General in the room of Mr. Pomeroy, who did not act under the commission sent to him and have ordered General Thomas's commission to bear date the same day General Pomeroy's did. They have empowered you, if you think fit, to appoint 3 brigade majors. Let's restart this sentence from here. Okay, they have empowered you, if you think fit, to appoint 3 brigade majors of such persons as you choose to honor with that command, and to commission them accordingly. They have appointed a committee to consider and report on the establishing an hospital and appointing a director. As soon as they have brought in their report and the Congress have come to any resolution on that subject, you will be made acquainted with it. Letters are sent with a recommendation to the colonies of New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, and Connecticut to complete the deficiencies in the regiments belonging to their respective colonies, which you shall retain in the Continental Army. Enclosed are the letters to New Hampshire and Rhode Island, which please to order forwarded by express immediately. And it is earnestly recommended to Rhode Island to send forward to you 360 men lately voted by their General Assembly, and to Connecticut to send forward 1,400 men lately voted by the General Assembly of that colony. Upon intelligence that Mr. Johnson is endeavoring to instigate the Indians to acts of hostility, the Congress have empowered General Schuyler to, quote, dispose of and employ all the troops in the New York Department in such manner as he may think best for the protection and defense of these colonies, the tribes of Indians in friendship and amity with us, and most effectually to promote the general interest, still pursuing, if in his power, the former orders of this Congress and subject to the future orders of the Commander-in-Chief, end quote. As the Congress are not fully acquainted with the number of the enemy you have to oppose and the extent of your operations, they, reposing confidence in your prudence, have resolved that, quote, such a body of troops be kept in Massachusetts Bay as you shall think necessary, provided they do not exceed 22,000, end quote. In a letter from Lord Dartmouth to Governor Martin, dated Whitehall, May 3rd, 1775, after recommending him to embody such of the men in 4 counties, which Governor Martin had represented as favorable to the views of administration, as are able to bear arms, is the following paragraph. Quote, I confess to you, sir, that this appears to me to be a matter of such importance that I cannot too earnestly recommend it to your attention, and that no time may be lost. In case of absolute necessity, I have received His Majesty's commands to write to General Gage to apprise him of the favorable circumstance and to instruct him that he do, upon application to you, send some able and discreet officer to you in order to concert means of carrying so essential a service into effect, and if necessary, to lead the people forth against any rebellious attempts to disturb the public peace, end quote. Whither the 5 vessels you mention to have sailed from Boston on the 11th instant are gone on this service, time must manifest. The bills, ordered to be struck by Congress, are in great forwardness. As soon as a sufficient quantity worth sending is completed, it will be sent to you. I have the pleasure to inform you that the Congress have received a letter from the Provincial Convention of Georgia dated 8th instant, informing that all the parishes in that colony, except 2, which it is supposed do not contain a score of freeholders inhabitants, met by their delegates in convention on the 4th instant, that those parishes that upon former occasions seemed reluctant have manifested a laudable zeal on this occasion, that several gentlemen in Savannah that have hitherto been neuter or declared against America now speak of the proceedings of Parliament as illegal and oppressive, that the convention had applied to the governor to appoint a day of fasting and prayer, with which requests the governor informed them he would comply, that they have chosen 5 delegates to represent their colony in this Congress, viz. John Houston, Archibald Bullock, Esquire, the Reverend Dr. Zubley, Lyman Hall, and Noble Wimberley Jones, Esquire. And lastly, that they have resolved strictly to adhere to the Continental Association and are heartily disposed zealously to enter into every measure that the Congress may deem necessary for the safety of America. Mr. Thomas and Mr. Trumbull's commissions are enclosed and in unsealed letters to them. When anything occurs respecting your department, you shall be made acquainted. I have the honor to be, with great esteem, Sir, your most obedient, humble servant, John Hancock, President. The enclosed for Mr. Trist, if any opportunity, please to send it into Boston. I have sent 5 bundles of commissions, 284, the rest shall follow. Okay. The LS, what is LS? Letter signed, a letter signed by the author, but not in the author's handwriting. Okay, got it. The letter signed is in Timothy Matlack's writing, except for the date line, closing, and 5 sentences noted below, which are in Hancock's writing. See notes 9, 16, 17, and 18. Hancock also signed his name. Matlack incorrectly addressed the cover to George Washington at Waterbury. Joseph Reed docketed the LS, quote, answered by Fessenden, the Express, August 5, end quote. Let's skim through. Can we read all these footnotes? Some of these are quite long. I think we won't read all of these footnotes, but maybe let's skim through them and see what stands out. Footnote number 1, Hancock presented George Washington's letter to Congress on 19th of July, and most of the resolutions reported below were passed that day. Osnaburg is a type of coarse linen. Okay, I was wondering. Footnote number 3, George Washington requested the purchase of tow cloth in his letters of 4th of August to Nathaniel Cook and Jonathan Trumbull Sr. Tow cloth is made of short broken fibers from flax, hemp, or jute. Great. George Washington announced Trumbull's appointment in General Orders 31st of July. You can skip forward. As always, for all these general orders, you can find them in the videos where I read them, if you're interested. Okay. Matroses were artillerymen who assisted gunners in loading, firing, and sponging the guns. Yeah. Committee reported Congress proceeds several resolutions. Okay. So they established a hospital for the Army on 27th of July. Reinforcements, copy resolution, enclosed for the rumors about an imminent Indian attack on the Mohawk Valley of New York. See Schuyler to George Washington, 15th of July. We read that one. And Benjamin Harrison to George Washington, 21st to 24th of July. I guess we'll get to that. Okay, let's read this longer footnote, 13. Josiah Martin, who had been governor of North Carolina since 1771, reported to the Earl of Dartmouth on 6th of July, 1775, that a packet of dispatches from London had been opened in Charlestown, and on 28th... Sorry, I got bitten by a bug. Oof. And on 28th August, he acknowledged receipt of a, quote, duplicate of the letter, end quote, receipt of a, quote, duplicate, end quote, of the letter here quoted by Hancock. Forced by crowds of armed citizens to abandon his palace at Newburn in 31st of May, 1775, Martin fled to Fort Johnston near the mouth of the Cape Fear River. When the fort was burned by patriots on 10th of July, we'll just wait for the trash truck to go by briefly. Okay. When the fort was burned by patriots on 10th of July, he retired to a British warship anchored in the river. Martin remained there until May 1776, at which time he joined the British fleet that unsuccessfully attacked Charlestown in June. He later assisted Lord Cornwallis in his southern campaign, but poor health forced him to go to England in 1781. Good riddance, I say. Okay, footnote number 14. These British vessels went to Maine and Nova Scotia. 15. Lyman Hall had represented St. John's Parish, Georgia in Congress since 13th of May, 1775, taking part in the debates but not voting until his credentials from the Provincial Convention arrived in Philadelphia on 20th of July. With them came John Houston, Archibald Bullock, and John Joachim Zubli. The fifth elected delegate, Noble Wimberley Jones, remained in Georgia. The letter of 8th July 1775 from Georgia Provincial Convention is printed. Footnote number 16. This and the previous sentence are in Hancock's writing. The enclosures of John Thomas and Joseph Trumbull have not been found. 17. This sentence appears in Hancock's writing to the left of his signature. Nicholas Trist, an ensign in the British 18th Regiment at Boston, was stationed until the fall of 1774 in Philadelphia, where he married an American woman and shared lodgings with some of the delegates to the First Continental Congress. Okay. This sentence appears in Hancock's writing in the left margin of the first page of the manuscript. Hancock sent George Washington 550 more commissions in September. Okay, I've run out of time to read the rest for now, but we'll finish the rest at home. I just wanted to say this is a beautiful day in front of Independence Hall. So, all right, here are the rest of the letters now. Okay, I will now begin reading the letters regarding the Adams family from the 24th of July. Let's begin with to John Adams from Samuel Chase. From Samuel Chase, Hartford Town, Monday afternoon, 24th of July, 1775. Dear Sir, I am this far arrived on my way home. Give me leave to introduce to your notice Mr. George Lux, a son of a gentleman who is my particular friend, a man of the most worthy and amiable character. He is bound for our camp, and would be glad to carry your commands to any of your friends, Mr. Carey, Mr. Hopkins, and Smith, young gentlemen of Balt Town, are also, which I believe would mean young gentlemen of Baltimore Town, are also for our camp and worthy of attention. I met the enclosed from a young gentleman in my office. The contents will please you. My warmest wishes attend you and your worthy brethren. I beg a line. Your affectionate and obedient servant, Samuel Chase. Footnote number 1. Since John Adams refers to Chase's mention of these men in letters of 27th and 28th July to James Warren and William Tudor below, a Monday date of 24th July would seem reasonable. Footnote number 2. George Lux was the son of William Lux, Baltimore merchant and shipowner. Although Carey has been identified as Richard Carey, aide to Washington, he, according to Freeman, was from Virginia rather than Baltimore. Smith and Hopkins remain unidentified. Footnote number 3. The enclosure was likely a letter of 21st July to Chase from Thomas Maddox, Jr., which reported that a Liverpool ship which had salt, cheese, and dry goods on board grounded near the West River and was burned by local people before Baltimoreans could get their hands on it. The letter also reported that the ship's owner had assured the doubtful captain before he sailed for America that 10,000 troops would arrive before him to protect him against violence. Finally, the letter mentioned a rumor that Gage had been taken prisoner. Next, let's read from John Adams to James Warren. 24th of July, 1775. Philadelphia. Dear Sir, in confidence, I am determined to write freely to you this time. A certain great fortune and piddling genius, whose fame has been trumpeted so loudly, has given a silly cast to our whole doings. We are between hawk and buzzard. We ought to have had in our hands a month ago the whole legislative, executive, and judicial of the whole continent, and have completely modeled a constitution, to have raised a naval power, and opened all ports wide, to have arrested every friend to government on the continent, and held them as hostages for the poor victims in Boston, and then opened the door as wide as possible for peace and reconciliation. After this, they might have petitioned and negotiated and addressed, etc., if they would. Is all this extravagant? Is it wild? Is it not the soundest policy? Yeah, he's talking about Dickinson here, right? He's saying, why did Dickinson want to write such a, conciliatory document as the Olive Branch Petition, which I read aloud to you all? He's saying, is this all extravagant? Is it wild? Is it not soundest policy to, do the things that a rebellious nation would do in establishing itself? Okay, let's move on. One piece of news. 7,000 weight of powder arrived here last night. We shall send along some as we can, but you must be patient and frugal. We are lost in the extensiveness of our field of business. We have a continental treasury to establish, a paymaster to choose, and a committee of correspondence or safety,
or accounts, or something. I know not what that has confounded us all day. Shall I hail you Speaker of the House, Counselor, or what? What kind of an election had you? What sort of magistrates do you intend to make? Will your new legislative and executive feel bold or irresolute? Will your judicial hang and whip and fine and imprison your scruples? I want to see our distressed country once more, yet I dread the sight of devastation. You observe in your letter the oddity of a great man. He is a queer creature, but you must love his dogs if you love him, and forgive 1,000 whims for the sake of the soldier and the scholar. Addressed to the Honorable James Warren, Watertown, favored by Mr. Hitchborne. RC. What does RC mean? RC. To select. RC. Recipients. Oh my gosh. This website. Recipient's copy. A recipient's copy is assumed to be in the hand of the signer unless it is otherwise described. Yeah, not found. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Reprinted from Draper's Massachusetts Gazette, 17 August 1775. This version is printed here because the newspaper seems to have tried to render the text exactly as John Adams probably wrote it, particularly in the use of dashes of varying length, which normally the editors treat as commas or periods, unless the dash serves the modern function of indicating a break in thought. Comparison of the newspaper version with contemporary British manuscript copies listed below in Note 1 shows no difference in wording with two minor exceptions. That discussed in Note 4 below, and the use of the complimentary clause, quote, yours, end quote, which occurs in all manuscript copies but number 3. None of the manuscript copies quite manages to reproduce all the dashes of varying lengths. All the listed copies except number 1 include the newspaper note, quote, Nota bene, this letter was anonymous, but wrote in the same hand with that addressed to Abigail Adams, end quote. Admin Graves, Commander-in-Chief, so I'm guessing Admiral, but I can't say for sure. Admiral Graves, Commander-in-Chief of the British fleet, to whom the original was forwarded, sent only copies back to England and to General Gage, but a search of his official correspondence and of his unpublished documentary memoir of his service in America has not turned up the original. It may have been given to the printer, who, in good 18th century fashion, saw no need to preserve it once the type had been set. But see note number 4 below. All right. Now let's get to the footnotes. Footnote number 1. This letter, a letter of John Adams to Abigail Adams of the same date, and a letter of Benjamin Harrison to George Washington, 21st to 24th of July, were all three printed in sequence in the Massachusetts Gazette. They were seized by the British when Benjamin Hitchborne, the bearer, was captured at Narragansett Bay en route to Massachusetts. Hitchborne had begged John Adams to give him letters to carry back home because, as one who had apprenticed under a Tory lawyer, he felt the need to prove his loyalty to the American cause. Copies of John Adams' letters were forwarded to England by Admiral Graves, General Gage, and others. Authentic contemporary copies known to the editors in British collections are these, and etc. Yeah. You can pause and read as you wish. Many other copies, both British and American, are recorded or exist as reproductions in the Adams Papers files. The purveyor of one copy attributed the letter to Samuel rather than John Adams, despite his knowledge that others did not agree with him, with the oblique reference to John Dickinson as a piddling genius. Yeah, John Adams was not a very big fan of John Dickinson. So, yeah, piddling genius. This letter brought to a head the conflict between him and John Adams over whether conciliatory or more vigorous measures should be pursued in the Congress. The expression of John Adams' impatience and frustration was not new, for he had relieved his feelings in earlier letters to Warren and Abigail Adams. Certainly at the time the letter was written, John Adams did not view it as exceptionally important, but its publication identified him as a leader among those pressing for strong resistance to Great Britain. Copies of the letter arrived in England on or about 17th of September. And were immediately printed in Lloyd's Evening Post and British Chronicle, 18th of 20th and to 20th September, and then in other newspapers as well. Their immediate impact was probably limited, for the king had already, on 23rd of August, proclaimed that the colonies were in rebellion, and the Olive Branch petition had been submitted to Lord Dartmouth on 1st of September, in whose hands it died. Thus, the letters at first probably confirmed ministerial views already held. Both the London Chronicle of 19th to 21st September, which took its version from the Massachusetts Gazette, and General John Burgoyne, identified the, quote, piddling genius, unquote, as John Hancock rather than Dickinson. In Britain, however, the breach between John Adams and Dickinson had become known by at least December, when a letter from London declared that the Peace Commission, led by the Howe brothers, sought, quote, to sow dissensions among the provinces, of which they entertain great hopes of success, from the supposed coolness between Mr. DKSN of Pennsylvania and Mr. J. blah 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 ADS of Massachusetts Bay, unquote. Well, that's not very disguised, is it? Dickinson and John Adams. Footnote number 3, John Adams resented this passages being interpreted as his wish for harsh treatment for Tories. See his explanation in Diary and Autobiography 320. Footnote number 4. In British contemporary copies, numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5, listed in note 1 above, this word appears as distressful. The same form is used in the copy furnished by an officer on board the Swan, the vessel which seized the ferry that was carrying Hitchborne from Newport to Providence. The Swan officer, writing to London on 14th of August, 2 weeks after the capture, says the letters were sent on to Graves, quote, "But I found an opportunity of copying 2 of them, and herewith send the copies to you," end quote. If the officer made his copies from the originals, his text may be more accurate in this one respect than that used by the Massachusetts Gazette. It is conceivable, however, that the Swan officer, given the passage of time, made his copies from copies produced for Graves. In the latter case, one must assume that some copyist made the mistake of writing distressful for distressed, the word that appears in both the Gazette and in the copy Graves forwarded to London. Of course, if distressful was in the original, then the newspaper was furnished with an inexact copy, and Graves sent a second such copy to London. No evidence has been found that the British tampered with the wording, as John Adams claimed. What a drama over the word distressful versus the word distressed. As a fellow editor, I appreciate such drama. Footnote number 5. General Charles Lee was, for whose reaction to this passage, see blah blah blah, etc., etc. Footnote number 6. Gosh, these footnotes are very long, aren't they? Well, let's hope seems to be the last one. Footnote number 6. The effect of the letter in America is difficult to assess because it is not printed in any newspaper outside of Boston. Thus, the extent to which a public debate occurred over its content is a question. The failure to reprint the letter suggests that the leading patriots, particularly those in Congress, wanted to avoid widely publicizing a formal split in their ranks. Gilbert Barclay, a British spy in Philadelphia, reported that as of 16th of September, John Adams' letter had not been printed in that city, largely because great pains had been taken to suppress them, and local printers feared printing anything not approved by the Congress. But Barclay promised to give his own copies as wide circulation as possible. Other manuscript copies circulated as well. That's an interesting reference. Geoffrey Seed, a British spy in Philadelphia. That might be a fun read if you're interested. The effect of the letters on John Adams personally is also hard to determine. Barclay claimed that John Adams met with a cool reception, that Quakers and others considered him an enemy to his country. Same page 22 to 24. Benjamin Rush, writing his autobiography years later, remarked that publication of the intercepted letters made John Adams into, quote, an object of nearly universal detestation, end quote, neglected by his friends and forced to walk, quote, our streets alone, end quote. But Rush recognized that this treatment was temporary. Except for mentioning his meeting Okay, wait 1 second before we go quite. So they're saying the effect of the letters on John Adams personally was hard to determine. Okay, what does this mean? The effect of the letter in America is difficult to speak of. Blah, blah. So the failure to reprint the letters suggests. Okay, so basically. Okay. I think what's happening here is, as I've mentioned before in John Adams' letters, the his letters, there was this general moratorium on or sort of censure on sharing any information from the Continental Congress to the general public, and it sounds like here. And in general, if you look back in previous videos, this one included, but also in other videos that I've recorded, John Adams shared many things from the Continental Congress in his letters that probably were not supposed to be shared. And it sounds like here he is now suffering the consequences of his indiscretion, shall we say. Yeah, and he's being shunned, which, for his oversharing, maybe that makes sense that he should, walk the streets alone. That kind of makes sense. It sounds right that he should be shunned for sharing such pertinent information and valuable information and, shall we say, vulnerable information that leaves the Continental Congress vulnerable, right? Although one could also ask the question if John Adams meant to share these things as a way of propagandizing anyone who should take these letters as serious, right? Perhaps these were all smokescreens, and John Adams had a different motive for portraying the Continental Congress as he did. That would be, in my opinion, attributing more to him than is provable, let's say. But it's not outside the realm of possibility that he may be propagandizing via these so-called oopsie daisies, where these letters fall into the wrong hands. I think that's wrong, but it's possible. With that out of the way, let's continue. Except for mentioning his meeting Dickinson on the street when Dickinson passed without any sign of recognition, John Adams apparently gave little weight to the reaction to the letters, nor was his role in the Congress notably affected. According to his own account, he continued active in the debates almost every day, and he served on as many committees between September and December 1775 as he had during the first session of the Second Continental Congress. He received assurance from Joseph Reed and Charles Lee that the letters were doing no harm, and when the passing months brought more repressive measures from Britain, he was, in a sense, proved right and enjoyed the acclaim that correct predictions, even dire ones, usually bring. It is possible that his improved reputation even led to publication of his two intercepted letters as late as 1st of January 1776 in the Boston Gazette. By that date, his call for genuine continental government with open ports, backed by naval power, would find more willing listeners. The British reaction to the letters centered on the contradiction between the tone of public statements of various patriot leaders and the attitude revealed in the letters. Okay, let me start again. Let's read that again. I didn't get it right. Okay. The British reaction to the letters centered on the contradiction between the tone of public statements of various Patriot leaders and the attitude revealed in the letters. The British officer on board the Swan referred to the, quote, real intentions of those miscreants who have misled His Majesty's subjects in North America to commit acts of open rebellion, end quote. General Burgoyne declared the author of the letters was, quote, as great a conspirator as ever subverted a state, end quote, and warned that, quote, this man soars too high to be allured by any offer Great Britain can make to himself or to his country. America, if his counsels continue in force, should be subdued and relinquished. She will not be reconciled, end quote. Any significant British political use of the letter had to await the opening of Parliament and responses to the King's speech of 26 October. In the ensuing debate, the letters were cited as evidence that reconciliation was a forlorn hope, that a rebellion was in progress which had independence as its goal. Even those friendly to America saw little possibility for improved relations on the basis of the Olive Branch petition, which was deemed a political ploy. John Adams' letter reinforced their perception. The climax came with the Prohibitory Act of 22nd of July, which stopped all American trade, but the intercepted letters were only one among many influences that brought that act into being. Indeed, the act might very well have come even if John Adams's private thoughts had never been public. Well, that is quite a note. And it does raise the question of the impact of John Adams's numerous and detailed violations of the Continental Congress's general notion and or commitment and or law, resolution, shall we say, that nothing shall be shared beyond the walls of Independence Hall. Right? These delegates were sworn to secrecy. And who is John Adams? Who does he think he is? To be able to supersede that and share details of the Congress's ongoings and deliberations outside of the general moratorium on such communications. It seems as if John Adams thought himself above the law. Those are my thoughts. Philadelphia, 24th of July, 1775. John Adams to Abigail Adams. My dear, it is now almost 3 months since I left you, in every part of which my anxiety about you and the children, as well as our country, has been extreme. The business I have had upon my mind has been as great and important as can be entrusted to one man, and the difficulty and intricacy of it is prodigious. when 50 or 60 men have a constitution to form a great empire, at the same time that they have a country of 1,500 miles extent to fortify, millions to arm and train, a naval power to begin, an extensive commerce to regulate, numerous tribes of Indians to negotiate with, a standing army of 27,000 men to raise, pay, victual, and officer, I really shall pity those 50 or 60 men. Yeah, I must see you ere long. Rice has wrote me a very good letter, and so has Thaxter, for which I thank them both. Love to the children, John Adams. I wish I had given you a complete history from the beginning to the end of the journey, of the behavior of my compatriots. No mortal tale could equal it. I will tell you in future, but you shall keep it secret. The fidgets, the whims, the caprice, the vanity, the superstition, the irritability of some of us is enough to... Addressed to Miss Abigail Adams Braintree, to the care of Colonel Warren, favored by Mr. Hitchborne. Okay, what does RC mean? Recipient copy. A recipient's copy is assumed to be in the hand of the signer unless it is otherwise described. RC not found. Okay. Some notes about the copy that is found. Footnote number 1. This is one of the 2 letters John Adams wrote from Philadelphia this day that fell into British hands when the bearer, Benjamin Hitchborne of Boston, was captured at Connecticut Ferry near Newport, Rhode Island, and foolishly failed to throw away a number of letters he was carrying. The other intercepted John Adams' letter. The other intercepted John Adams' letter was addressed to James Warren. It alluded at its outset to John Dickinson, though it did not name him, as, quote, a certain great fortune and piddling genius, end quote, who had, quote, given a silly cast to our whole doings, end quote, and it led to the historic quarrel between John Adams and Dickinson. Brought to Boston on 6th of August, John Adams' letters were published in Margaret Draper's Massachusetts Gazette. The manuscript copies were sent to London by Gage, Graves, and others. British papers printed and reprinted them, and for some months, until events caught up with his sentiments, John Adams was notorious on both sides of the Atlantic as the arch advocate of American military resistance and independence from Great Britain. An editorial note summarizing this incident and its effects was, with references to sources and discussions, is in John Adams' diary and autobiography, blah, blah, blah. John Adams' later recollections of the affair are insane. A fuller account must be deferred until the letter to Warren, which was the more controversial of the two, is printed in Series 3 of the present edition. By that time, one may at least hope the missing originals may have come to light. In the meantime, It should be pointed out that although about 24 manuscript texts of the intercepted letters are present, mostly... Okay, I might not read all of this because it's very in the weeds about the best are so far as is known the original letters, though it is possible manuscripts of them. The editors attach a little weight to the fact that, for October. So the present letter offered sale at 120. The most authoritative. So we're going to skip all of this. We don't really need to know any of this. The only text you could, if you're an editor, you can stop. As an editor, I understand you want to get the references right? I'm an editor myself, so please pause this video and stick to it. But as a reader, we don't care really too much, right? So claiming any textual authority is a curious one. Otherwise effective. This is all very interesting as if you're an editor, but not if you're a reader, because as a reader, we don't really care if this is so in the weeds, right? Attached to is a single leaf from the earlier copy containing on one side the postscript and address of John Adams' letter to Abigail Adams, and on the other side to the following undated and unsigned message, which looks altogether like an original note of transmittal. Quote, "Honorary Sir, if Colonel Hatch is with you, please to let him see this, which has been corrected by..." We really do not need to know any of this, right? This is all very in the weeds. It matters if you're an editor and a deep nerd of all this stuff. This is very interesting. You can pause the video and read it all, but this is very much not the sort of thing I want to burden you with. Look at this, for example. It looks in fact as if the printer had either the original or more accurate copy than is now available, and that he blah 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 blah. Right? We don't care. So please, pause the video, read all of this. If you do, I'm gonna move on from all of this. It's all about typographical errors, printers and editors. This is in the weeds. Please pause now if you want to read it. Good luck. The final letter for today is Richard Cranch to John Adams. 24th of July, 1775. Richard Cranch, Braintree. July 24th, 1775. Dear Bror, which may mean brother, but I do not know. Dear Bror, Bror. Sister Adams informs me that you complain that your friends this way neglect writing to you. I believe a share of the blame belongs to me, and shall now endeavor to make some amends. We have lately had several little expeditions from this quarter against the enemy, a particular account of which, as near as I can collect it from those who were present, I shall give you. On the 11th instant, in the evening, about 400 men, partly from the camp at Roxbury and partly from guards on our shore, went off from Germantown in 47 whaleboats in order to sweep Long Island, then surrounded with men of war. Landed on the island at 10 o'clock at night, parted into 2 grand divisions, and marched to the house. Major Tupper commanded, and Captain Shaw, who lately lived on Deer Island, conducted him to the house. Shaw burst in a window, and entered the Tuppen after him. The men, in the meantime, being properly stationed, they expected to have catched some Tories there, but found none of any note. Our people came on so secretly that they were not known to be on the island until they entered the house. They demanded of the man who was in the house, quote, what people were on the island, end quote, and were answered that a number were in the barn, who had been sent from Boston to cut the hay and make it. Upon which our people entered the barn and seized them all prisoners before they knew they were in danger. Among the prisoners in the house was a lady, perhaps une fille de joie, I don't know how to speak French, perhaps une fille de joie, who pretended to be on the point of marriage with a captain of one of the transports. All right, let me take a second and parse this French. Une fille de joie. Okay, I know a little bit of French, in the sense that I know that, joie de vie means love of life. So, joie, maybe? De joie? Une fille de joie? Okay, I don't know. I'm just gonna guess that this means a virgin. Okay. Who pretended to be on the point of marriage with a captain of one of the transports. 15 prisoners, about 30 cattle, a horse, and about 100 sheep were brought off that night undiscovered. Next morning, about 10 whaleboats went on again in broad day from Dorchester to burn the barns and hay on the island, supposed to be about 70 tons. These boats were discovered immediately by the men of war which surrounded the island, and barges and cutters were sent to cut them off. Our people, however, burnt the house and barns and got off without a man being killed or wounded in the boats or on the island, though a most heavy fire was kept up from the men of war from above and below the island, whose shot both ways swept across the island where our men were, and though our boats were pursued by the barges and tenders continually firing on them so near that they were sure of taking a number of our boats, as they thought, yet we escaped. Captain Gould of Weymouth, who was most exposed, was told by the officer of the man-of-war to, quote, yield, for he was his prisoner, end quote. Gould answered, quote, not yet, end quote, and discharged his musket full at him, and encouraging his men to pull up, he escaped with the skin of his teeth. Okay, I like this guy, Gould. Captain Gould of Weymouth. Yeah, that's good stuff right there. When some of our foremost men were landed at the head of the Moon being the island, the Moon Island, they fired briskly on the enemy's barges and kept them off so as to secure the landing of the hindermost, which were so hotly pursued. Excuse my previous yawn. In this engagement, one of our men, Mr. Clark of Stoughton, was killed. Another expedition has been from hence to Nantasket and the lighthouse. Not many days ago, a small man of war drew up close to the houses of Nantasket within the gut, and afterwards paraded it by coming up as far as Pig Rocks by Hoff's Neck, and then lying off Hingman Cove, and then returning to Nantasket again. These movements made our people conclude that the man-of-war was sent to Gage's army, the grain then ready to cut on the lands of Nantasket, especially as the barge had seized Mr. Milton of Nantasket and his cart and oxen, and carried him and his oxen to the Admiral, where the oxen were kept, but the man, after much examination, released. Under his persuasion, last Tuesday night, our men from Germantown and the neighboring shore, to the amount of about 400 guards, mowers, etc., passed over to Hingman in boats, and from thence by land to Nantasket, having engaged a number of carts to come over the long beach. They with great expedition mowed and sent off the grain to the amount of 70 cartloads, and having done that on Thursday morning, a company commanded by Major Vos of Milton went over to the lighthouse, took down and brought off the lamps, brought off 1 barrel of gunpowder, several tierces of oil, a quantity of old cordage, several boats, etc., and then burnt the lighthouse, but not the dwelling house. Then, returning to Nantasket, they found that the burning of the lighthouse had alarmed the men of war, and that their barges and cutters were sent down to attack our people, which they accordingly did, 7 of their barges being lashed together for that purpose. A hot fire ensued for near an hour, but none of our men were killed and only 2 wounded. Our people tried to draw them on shore by seeming to run from them, but to no purpose. The men of war's men seemed evidently afraid to come near them, and at last put off so as to be out of the reach of our muskets. When Mr. Milton was carried on board the Admiral, he examined him very strictly about the whaleboats that lately appeared in the harbor, what their number was, where they were kept, whether he could pilot his people to them, etc., to all which he made such answers as gave the great man no satisfaction, especially when he told him that he understood that our people kept the whaleboats drawn up in the woods. I fear you will be tired with the length of this scrawl, unless relieved by believing it to be designed for your amusement by your affectionate brewer, R.C. I think brewer means brother, Richard Cranch. P.S. Please give my best regards to Mrs. S. Adams, and tell him to Mr. S. Adams, and tell him that I saw his wife and daughter at Dedham last Thursday, and heard from his son. They are all well. Your family and all the circle of our friends are as well as usual. I have heard lately from Mr. Payne's family, who were then well. Please give my kind regards to him. A few days ago, Mr. J.N.O. Ralston, watchmaker, and his family procured a pass to come out of Boston, who is the only one that I have heard of that has had a pass since the Battle of Charleston. He landed at Ruggles, now Bent's, and came to see me. He says it is sickly among the inhabitants, and more so among the troops, that the inhabitants are treated with great rigor. 3 men were committed to jail for only going up into a steeple to look out, that he was threatened for daring to look out from the top of his house, that a provost major terrifies like the Holy Office, no one knowing who is the victim, till too late to escape if that was possible. Poor Mr. Jas Lovell, I believe that's James Lavelle. Poor Mr. James Lavelle, Mr. Leach, and Mr. Hunt, the publisher, are in jail. Gino? I don't know what Gino means. Gino Cotton Depsecki is dead. I don't know who this is. Footnote number 1. The raid on Nantasket occurred on the 18th and on the Brewsters on the 20th. The Boston Lighthouse was and still is located in Little Brewster, formerly often called Beacon Island. Yeah, Beacon Island. The British took prompt steps to repair the light, and on 31st of July, another raiding party under Captain Benjamin Tupper wrecked it again and captured a detachment of Marines. So let's take a look at the map real quick. I'll show you if I can find it, where it is. Here's Beacon Island. Let's see, does that make any sense? I don't think so. No, that's not the Beacon Island we're talking about. No. Okay, that's all the way down in South Africa. Yeah, so here's the thing. The Beacon Island we're talking about is, I believe, the Boston Light. Right? That is what I would believe it's called. Yeah. Little Brewster Island. Let's go back to this. Little on the Brewsters of the Little Brewster. Yeah. So that's the correct island. So basically the Patriots rode all the way out to this to this island and then burned the lighthouse on it. This is a series of islands in Boston Harbor. Okay, I hope that helps. There you go. Finally, let's read Abigail Adams to Mercy Otis Warren, 24th of July, 1775. Braintree. My dear Mrs. Warren, I have been hoping every day since I received your obliging favor to get time to thank you for it, but many avocations, some from company, some from family affairs, have prevented. I have not wrote, only to my counterpart since, from whom I have received 2 letters since you left me. The last was 7 of July, and wrote in better spirits than any I have received since his absence, and gave me better spirits for 2 reasons. The first, because he appeared easier, and the second, because he tells me he hopes it will not be more than a month before he shall return. I know my pleasure will communicate some degree to my friend from the benevolent sympathy of her heart. I was much obliged to your worthy friend for calling and breakfasting with me, though deprived of that pleasure a few days before, owing to my having been up all the night before with my sister Adams, who about sunrise was delivered of a fine daughter. Your apprehensions with regard to my health are a testimony of your regard, as the disorder does not increase upon me. I do not apprehend any danger from it. 'Tis true, I enjoy a good flow of spirits for the most part. I sometimes wonder at myself, and fear lest a degree of stupidity or insensibility should possess my mind in these calamitous times, or I could not feel so tranquil amid such scenes, and yet I cannot charge myself with an unfeeling heart. I pity, commiserate, and as far as my ability reaches, feel ready and desirous to relieve my fellow creatures under their distresses. But I am not naturally, 'tis no virtue acquired in me, of that restless, anxious disposition. You apprehend more than there really was in a letter, which I could not, consistent with my regard to my dearest friend, communicate. I only wish I had been near enough to have shared a solitary hour with him. You will be sensible, no doubt, from a communication of the last packet, which your friend received, that they have to combat not only other provinces but their own, a doubly difficult task, when those who ought to aid become stumbling blocks. But how hard is it to divest the humane mind of all private ambition, and to sacrifice ourselves and all we possess to the public emolument. You can pause and read the footnotes if you wish.
If you enjoyed me reading these letters, please give a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.